alphabets. Today is June 6, 1984, and this is Joe Todd, an interview with Ethel Mabel Sutter Jordan. Ma'am, where were you born?
I was born west of Alene, Oklahoma.
And when's your birthday?
August the 17th.
What year?
1905.
1905. Who was your father?
Edward E. Sutter.
Edward E. Sutter. And your mother?
Mabel Shelton Sutter.
Shelton. Where were they from?
My mother was born in Hays, Kansas. I should have told you my father first.
Yeah, where's he from?
I can't think of a little town in Illinois.
How come they came to Oklahoma, or Oklahoma Territory?
I don't know that. My father's parents were from Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And they settled around Chicago and then went out into this after a number of years. They met and married, and
Did they homestead out here?
no, they came here soon after.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. How about Alene? Hmm. What kind of house were you born in?
Well, a house that my daddy constructed, he and his brother, after they were married. Wasn't too large a house, but then it was a new house.
With a frame house?
Yes.
Hmm. Do they have a quarter section they lived on?
I would think so.
Yeah.
I know that my daddy planted a mile of cottonwood trees on either side of the road to this house. He tried to beautify it.
What kind of crops did you all raise?
I might add there that my father's father sold nursery stock, and that was his occupation. So they set out orchards, and they got these trees and all these things from the nursery. You see.
What was your grandfather's name?
A.J. Sutter.
A.J. Sutter.
Mm-hmm.
Did he have a nursery down here?
No, he didn't have one. He bought the stock, and I don't know where. I really don't know where. But he sold to people all over this area, and that was how these orchards were started in this area.
Hmm. You said they settled up around Chicago in that area?
Their parents came there.
Yeah.
Of course, they didn't come at the same time. My grandmother was a baby, and my granddad was 9 years old.
Hmm. Tell me about the chores you did on the farm as a little girl.
Oh, mercy, everything. Whatever it took to do, you know.
Mm-hmm. What about the laundry?
Oh, of course, I helped with that, but then I was the oldest child, and I had two sisters younger than me, and then my brother, and he was 16 years, not quite 16 years younger than I. So I was actually the boy, and I just about did all kinds of everything.
Oh, did you plow?
Huh?
Do the plowing?
Well, I did some. I could drive on, no matter how many horses.
Mm-hmm.
Drive horses, ride horses.
Did you plow with horses or mules?
All both.
Both? What'd you like to work with best, horses or mules?
Well, they're just like human beings. They're different in disposition.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was interesting. Then we moved to Phoenix, Arizona, when I was 5 years old, and we stayed out there until I was in the third grade. And my daddy always had had horses, and he had a team of mules that he sold at that time. And when we were going to move back here, came back here and bought land again on this side of Cimarron River. And he got $600 for that team of mules he had. So you know it was a good team of mules.
Yeah. How come you all moved back to Oklahoma from Phoenix?
My daddy couldn't stand the heat out there.
Yeah. Do you remember Phoenix?
Oh yes, I've gone back many times, but I went to school there when I was almost 9 years old.
Yeah. What was Phoenix like at that time? How big was it?
Not very large, not very large.
Mm-hmm.
They all went out there on train. He had several brothers that went, and one sister and several brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And their families, well, they've died, but their families are still out there. My daughter and I drove out there the last week of March, visited this year. But it's certainly a big place now.
Yeah, it's grown quite a bit. So you went back to school when you got back here.
Yes.
Where'd you go to school here?
Well, I went to Cheyenne Valley mainly.
Cheyenne Valley?
Cheyenne Valley.
Where's that located?
Oh, well, that's 9 miles west of Orienta.
Of where?
Orienta. Orienta.
Hmm. Why was it called Orienta?
Orient Railroad. Train went through there. Had a depot. Lots of things were shipped in and out there, cattle and horses and all those kinds of things. It had a stockyard there, really.
Yeah. And did you farm when you came back here?
Yes.
What'd you raise when you came back?
Wheat. Wheat mainly. Some barley, but mainly wheat. Cattle, horses and mules.
How many acres of wheat did you plant?
Well, at that time, you farmed with horses. I'm just going to make a rough estimate of maybe 250 acres.
And all that plowing was done by horse? That's a lot of acres to plow by.
Maybe I overestimated.
Well, no,
it's possible I did,
Yeah.
because I know how much we owned. We had 70 and 50 and 55, and I think my daddy rented some, so it was around
Yeah.
200 acres. I mean, 250, I would guess.
Yeah, that's still a lot to plow by horse. Tell me about a wheat harvest in those days.
Well, it was. I can't say the right word, but the most hectic thing you ever got into. So many people around, and so many people to eat and to hire and all this. You see, we use headers. You know what a header is?
Hey, tell me about the header. What does that do?
Well, it cuts the wheat and it comes onto an elevator, and then it goes up this elevator that has canvas and chains on it into a header barge. It's called a big barge and when they get that barge loaded, there's always 2 men in it, because one loaded, the other drove the horses, and then they would take it to some designated spot in the field and unload it and make a stack. And that had to be stacked just right, or it wouldn't. When it rained, the rain would go clear through the grain. Otherwise, if you stacked it right, it would last, stay there all summer without ever rotting.
Mhm. How big were the stacks?
I don't know. They were probably 30 feet long and 20 feet wide, something like that. And just put one right after another.
Mhm.
4 to 6 probably in one section.
Mhm. When was the wheat threshed?
Well, first time threshing machine came through probably in August.
Mhm. What was your job in the wheat harvest? What did you do?
I never helped. I never was out in the field and harvest at all.
Mhm.
I helped mother with to cook and so forth.
To cook for the harvest hands?
Yes, we fed all those people that, and we always had. Well, you can guess there was the header people, one on there, and there were 2 in each barge, and 1 or 2 to stack. So there were 8 or 10 men at harvest time to feed.
And how long would it take to harvest all the wheat?
Can't remember that really, but I expect a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Tell me about World War I. Do you remember that, the stories about it?
I don't remember that very well, although I do know we had people that lived out there that was dear friends to us, and their son went and he didn't come back. It was a big worry to me.
Yeah. What was his name?
Frank Nicholson.
Frank Nicholson.
Wait a minute now. I shouldn't have said it for a minute, I think. His name was Edwin Nicholson.
Edwin Nicholson. Do you remember Armistice Day? The day the war ended.
Yes.
Tell me about that day.
We lived out there in the country, and of course we were so pleased. But then there was no celebration or anything to that effect.
Mm-hmm. Did you go through high school?
Yes.
What year did you graduate?
Well, I was 18. You can figure that out.
About 1922, 23?
Probably 22.
Mm-hmm. After you graduated, what did you do?
I got married 1 month after I was 18.
Mm-hmm. Where'd you meet your husband?
School.
School?
High school.
And you got married. Where did you get married?
I got married here in Fairview.
Here in Fairview. And what's your husband's name?
J. Jordan. J.F. Jordan. J.Y.F. Jordan.
What was Fairview like in the 1920s?
Oh, thinly settled, not too many people, but still, we had a real lively little town here. We've always had, and we had a lot of people that had pride in their town, and we've always tried to make it better.
Mm-hmm.
They did from the beginning.
Did you live in Fairview after you got married?
Not for a while, but I have lived in Fairview 38 years.
Mm-hmm. Was your husband a farmer also?
Yes, and then he sold farm machinery here in town after we moved to Fairview.
Mm-hmm. And what year did you move to Fairview? You've lived here 38 years?
You have to figure there a little bit. In October, it was 38 years last October.
In 1946.
That's about it.
How did the Depression affect you and your family, 1930s?
Bad, but we were young and had plenty of spirit, so we stayed right in there, you know.
Did many people from this area go to California?
No. There were quite a few went to Beaver, Oklahoma, out in that area just before that, and before the Dust Bowl days, see.
Mm-hmm.
But there wasn't, I don't know of anyone that did move to California.
Yeah. How bad were the dust storms here in Fairview?
Well, I lived in the country at that time.
Oh, you did?
See, I didn't move in here till 46.
That's
so
right, that's right. Well, how bad were they out on the farm
It was
then?
bad. It was bad. You would be everything covered with dust from morning, from the night time until you got up in the morning. There would be times when those dust storms would come in and everything be covered with dust.
Did you try to keep the dust out of the house?
I did, but we had built a house, a new house out there in 1930, and the dust didn't come through too badly. But in the summertime, it wouldn't be very cool to have to keep all the windows closed.
Yeah. What did some of the other people do to keep the dust out?
Well, they would put up damp cloths, towels, and such, and put it in the window and let the dust collect on that.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have fans. We didn't have electricity.
Did you have a wind charger, a windmill,
Yes,
to produce electricity?
we had a wind charger. We also had a refrigerator that had the burner would operate with kerosene and made ice, and we had that for several years, and it worked real good.
So you all survived the Depression fairly well then?
Oh yes, we couldn't make many payments. We did well to pay interest, but they were glad to do that way rather than take it back. They didn't try to ever take any of our stuff, claim it back again. We never lost anything ever, not even anything.
That's good. Pearl Harbor Day. What were you doing that day?
I can't remember that, but my parents and my husband and I and J. Edward and Mary Ann, my two children, had just gotten back from California. We probably had just been home 3 days when we heard it, but we knew that they had lots of camouflage places in California that as we drove through.
Was there much work for the war effort in this area during World War II?
Oh yes, yes.
What did people do here to support the war effort?
Whatever the government asked.
Mm-hmm.
Bonds, we bought bonds. If you couldn't buy them, you went to the bank. My dad went to the bank and borrowed money to buy bonds. And of course, we were rationed on almost everything, from tires and kerosene or gasoline. We had trouble to get gasoline. We couldn't. We had. My father would take a load of wheat to Alene, Oklahoma, and bring back so many sacks of flour and put them in the attic of our house. And he took those all back. The government wanted the flour back, and he took that back, and Mother tried to make bread out of rice flour and barley flour. It was heavy, but we could eat it. But we were always happy, and we loved music. We had always such a good time with our music. When we came back from Arizona, my daddy bought a new Baldwin piano for me. I was past 8, coming 9, I'd be 9 years old in August, and he had been able to read notes and played in bands and this and that, and he could play the violin, and he taught me what he could, and the notes and the time by playing the violin. But then as soon as he could find a teacher for me, we had music lessons.
So you've always had music?
We've always had music. We enjoyed that of an evening almost every
You still play?
Yes, I play a little.
What do you like best about farm and ranch life?
Well, I am a great believer in the Lord, and I love the music. I love cattle. Those have been the pleasures of my life. Of course, I like horses too. I love horses, and I've always liked to ride nice horses.
As a little girl, what kind of games did you play in school or at home?
I don't know. It was mainly music. We would sing. My sisters and I, we'd sing, and we would work to try to get the other one off the pitch or off of the. We sang altos and sopranos and all of that. See, and we would try to get the other one off the tune some way or other, you know, and that was one of the greatest fun that we had. And Mother would come in, and the dishwater where we were washing dishes would be as cold as it could be. And here we've been singing.
Mm-hmm.
But then another thing, we had a lot of fun riding horses.
Yeah.
You can't. There's nothing more pleasure than to get up in the morning and ride over the pastures and see the little birds and turtle doves and the killdeers and the little rabbits and the little quails, and it's beautiful. And he won't ride a horse, he's afraid of it.
How old is he, your grandson?
He's 17. And I said, you are missing so much in your life. But we had lots of fun racing those horses. We would race those horses.
You ever ride side saddle?
No.
Always rode astride.
You're right.
What was fair?
See, we had no way to cut out cattle, and we ran a lot of cattle always. And we had no way to move cattle only by horse. And we had to, if we wanted to go out here and get a horse or a cow out of a herd of cattle, we did it with a horse. If we moved anything, we moved it with horses.
Who trained your cutting horses?
My daddy.
Your dad? Did you ever help with the branding of the cattle?
We didn't brand much.
You didn't brand?
No.
When was the first time you came to Fairview?
Oh, I don't know.
What did the town look like when you were here in the early days?
You mean my impression?
Yeah.
I think the impression that struck me more than anything is when we came. Well, we came to my grandparents across on the better play that back to me. I might not brought all this. We came by horses and a buggy over here to our new farm, where we're going to live, and to drive through these gloss mountains here with the isinglass and the cedars and all, and the rim rock on these mountains out here was the biggest impression I had when I first came here. It was a short time later before we came to Fairview.
Is that what they call them, the Gloss Mountains, because of the isinglass?
I think they call them glass mountains.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think the glass people around here, I think, call them Gloss Mountains, don't they?
I don't know. It's been a controversy for quite a while.
Yeah.
Which is which. But anyway, they were beautiful. There were currant bushes on there, and people would pick currants off of them. Lots of currants on those mountains. especially if we had rain.
How many wagons did you have on the farm?
Well, we had to have a wagon for each one of those header barges that brought in hay, so we would have 3 or 4.
What kind of wagons were they?
Oh, I couldn't tell you.
Ever help your father pull maintenance in the wagons?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, like, greasy axles and
Oh,
all?
no. No, Dad always kept we girls as ladies, we didn't do any of that kind of work. He either had a hired hand or something that did all that kind of stuff.
What kind of work around the house did you do?
Just anything that wasn't necessary.
So you had a pretty good childhood then?
Yes, we had lots of fun in our home.
Good. Let's see. Ever know your grandparents?
Oh, I knew them all. I knew them all quite well.
Were any of your grandparents in the Civil War?
So, we're quite older now.
How about their fathers? Were they in the Civil War?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Did they ever tell you stories about when?
I shouldn't have said that. I did have, it was my grandparents, my great-grandparents. Go on one side was in the war.
Which side was he on?
Mother's
Okay.
parent.
What was his name?
Vance.
Vance?
V-A-N-C-E.
Is that his last name?
Yes.
Was he on the north or south?
They came from Missouri, and I believe they might have been Confederate.
Did your grandparents ever tell you stories about when they were kids? About moving west or?
My grandparents did. My grandmother's parents they loved to travel, and they would fix up a wagon with a covered wagon and put a stove and a bed and travel somewhere almost every fall.
What were their names?
Shelton, D.A. Shelton.
D.A. Shelton. And they would just travel.
They would do that about a month or two in the fall.
Where would they go? Just
Visit relatives one place or another. They had relatives in Kansas. Mother was born in Kansas, Hayes, Kansas. But her parents then Dave Shelton was born in Kentucky, and my grandmother was born in Missouri.
I call it Missouri.
Yeah, but that's not the way it's pronounced.
True. What's your favorite story your grandparents told you?
Always fascinating to me. One time they took one of these trips to Missouri, goodness alive, I keep saying. You got to scratch that off. And they came back in the eastern part of the state. I don't know whether it was near Tulsa or where, but they stopped for the night and tied their horses to the back of the wagon, and the next morning they got up and one of their horses had been cut loose, and the Indians had taken their horse. And my granddad didn't say anything about it, but they were having some kind of a races in some area there where they had horse races and so forth, and he just went down there and stood around and after a while, an Indian came by and asked him if he would like to buy a horse, and he said, well, he might. So after a while, he took him to where his horse was, and I think he gave him $5 to get the horse back.
Mm-hmm.
And that story was always interesting.
Yeah. Well, there are many Indians up around this area.
Yes, we've always had Indians.
What, Cheyenne?
Arapaho.
Arapaho. Did you know many of the old Indians?
Not personally. No.
Yeah. Ever go to any of their dances or the powwows?
I have gone to dances, yes. I enjoy them.
I guess they still have them here, don't they?
They have it at Canton.
At Canton.
East of Canton, a little ways. Few miles. There was another thing that was really highly entertaining in our area, and that was Hess's Picnic.
What's the name of it?
Hess, Hess, a picnic. He would have a picnic. I don't know how to describe it. It was on the north side of the Canadian River, and probably 14 miles west of Cleo Springs. And they would have a carnival come in there, and these Cheyenne and Arapaho Indians from Canton would come in there and put up their tents, and they would have horse racing and rodeo and a regular picnic, and a carnival would come in, and they would have all kinds of games to play and all that sort of thing. And many people went there and camped and visited and just really had a good time.
What was the purpose of the picnic? Just
Get together, I guess. I don't know. Everybody loved it.
Yeah.
And these Indians would buy a beef or two and make beef jerky, and we kids would go down there and see these lines put up, with all this beef jerky on it.
what time of year was that?
That's in August.
In August.
Everybody took their horses there to race them too, you see.
Did you know Mr. McCulley, who built the sod house up at Cleo Springs?
No, but there was a man west of Orienta named Vance that had really a lovely sod house and kept it plastered.
Is it still standing, or?
It has fallen down after he died, and one kept it up, but it was the best one in the country.
How big was it?
Oh, probably 4 rooms.
Ever live in a sod house?
No.
What kind of man was your father?
Well, what would you want to? He was ambitious. And he loved music. It don't matter where it was, if he could he'd like to hear it. Like music.
Was he strict on the kids?
Oh yes, we minded. We minded. He wasn't cruel, but he expected us to keep our word, and he kept his word, and we were supposed to too.
Yeah. What kind of personality did he have, your father?
Well, he was a high-strung man.
Was he jovial, or?
Oh yes, and he respected his wife and children, and saw that everyone else did too.
And what kind of mischief did you get into with the?
Not much.
Not much.
No, not really.
Tell me about your early Christmases.
I'll tell you the most notable one was I probably was 14 years old, and we had to come to town. Oh, wait, that's not right. I was younger than that because we had a car when I was 14. as the first Ford. But before that, we had to drive to Fairview to get any kind of gifts or any of that sort of thing. And it snowed about a week before Christmas. And I'm always afraid to say how deep it was on the level ground, but I always have thought it must have been 18 inches. And of course, we had to go through these passes through these mountains to go either south or north from where we lived. So we couldn't go any place for Christmas, or didn't have any gifts for Christmas. So we had to just make shift what we had. And Mother gave me a pencil, and my sister got a pair of gloves. She on hand. We made her candy. We made her popcorn. We made our own Christmas, and see, it was more fun than any other Christmas in my life.
Have a Christmas tree?
I don't think that year, no. It was too much trouble to get it.
Yeah. What kind of Christmas tree would you normally have?
Always a cedar.
Cedar?
We still do.
Yeah. How would you decorate it in those years?
Well, we never strung popcorn or cranberries or any of that kind of thing. I guess Mother just had bought ornaments to put on the Christmas tree, because we didn't make that kind of thing. She probably came back from Phoenix, Arizona with that kind of thing.
About 4th of July.
We picnicked. We always went someplace and picnicked.
Where would you go? to
Homemade
picnic?
ice cream, or some relative, or some lake, or something like that.
And you say your first car was a Ford, and you had that about 1918?
Oh, yes, well, let's see.
So if you were 14, that'd be about 1918.
Well, I expect that's about right. It seems like we might have had it before that, but it doesn't matter.
Were there many cars in Fairview at that time?
Well, there were several in Cheyenne Valley. My father-in-law, he wasn't my father-in-law then, but he had a new Ford. He had a player piano. We gathered there after I got to go in with my husband, or my fiance, and play this player piano and have a lot of fun, and dance and sing and so forth.
Whenever you're recording Mr. Jordan, where would you go? What do you do when you're recording back then?
Well, of course, we went to church some, not so much. We'd come to Fairview to movies. And just picnic or ride around, or we would go, we used to sometimes go down here to Cantonments. You know where that's at, west of Canton?
Yes, ma'am. The old post?
Old post, yeah. I don't know, we just explored around,
Who was your favorite movie star in those days?
I'm sorry to say, but I never was very fond of movies. I can't even think back that time who was. I always thought Roy Rogers was clever as could be, but he wasn't much of a movie star.
Yeah.
But he was an entertainer.
In those days, I think it was like, Jean Harlow and Rudolph Valentino. And
Yeah, well, I liked that. I thought they were interesting, but so many movies, I either liked a movie or I didn't like it. And if I liked them, fine. If I didn't, I would sleep. I'm the same way about television. If I like it, I look at it. If I don't, I turn it off. I don't let it just run because it bores me.
Well, I think we have a pretty good interview.
You do. I don't see what. I hope you can straighten it up so it'll sound better than I
yeah.
told it.
Mm-hmm. Is your father related to Mr. Sutter of Sutter's Mill in California?
I always wondered, I don't know, Pops. I never did get the genealogy of my father's side. I've got it on my mother. My mother relatives came from England, but my father's came from Germany. I know that Alsace-Lorraine in Germany. Well, France owned part. They always, had trouble over that little strip of land there, and but they were German people, and they spoke German.
Did they ever talk about their life in Germany before they came over, or hear any stories about this?
No, I don't. Well, I do know that the reason they came to America was they didn't want my grandfather didn't want him to go into the German army. They didn't want him to be a soldier, and they moved over here for the freedom part.
Yeah, in those days, there was always a war going on in Europe somewhere.
And and that's why he moved to America.
Well, thank you.
If he would have been in the Civil War or one of those, this lady that did the genealogy on my mother's side said you would have if I could just find the boat that they came over on, they say everything's in that. They say it's really wonderful.
Do you have any idea when they came to this country?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how many brothers my grandfather had, nor sisters, and mother told me all these things too, and I didn't pay attention. I don't know if she knew all of them, but she knew a lot of them. They came here to visit.
Now, we have a bunch of records in Oklahoma City on genealogy.
I know you had this lady wanted to, if I was interested, said she'd show me how to get this on my father, and I would like to. I don't have much information to start on.
Well, you say his...
Yeah, I could go back to this little town in Illinois. I'm quite sure there are a lot of relatives in this cemetery. There's a Sutter out here west of Woodward that has registered Angus cattle that I see his name occasionally, and I wonder if that is any of our relatives.
Well, you might check with him.
Well, he probably wouldn't know any more about it than I would. So.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, tell me.
Don't let me think on this.
Okay.
Been gone a long time, and to get their first names and all this, it's hard for me to. There was a man here that had a grocery store named A.J. Floyd, and he raised a family here. And there was an A.J. Bowers that started the bank here. And there was a Dr. Smith that was the doctor and the pharmacist here. But to give you the details, they bought this piece of land, and then they started to, or I think they filed on this land and then broke it up into city lots and streets and so forth. But still, I see old pictures occasionally of football teams and their bands and all this, and they had a great time here. But I couldn't give you the details on it.
Okay.
All the Orient and all these little towns out here that
Cross over.
well, that used to be your trading post.
His name is Austin Fireball.
If it'd help you any, I could call him.
Yeah, you would mind.
Well, let's not do that one.
Okay.
We've got a book from all of these different people who, they're coming to this area. And I've got that book.
You do?
And so, it's got all these different people.
Is it a history of Major County?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of information.
Good. You said you had your 50th wedding?
Jubilee.
Jubilee.
Settling this country.
Oh, at Fairview.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. There may, was there an anti-German feeling
Yes,
around?
well,
What about the German people that lived here?
that's what I'm telling you. They didn't enter into this war, lots of them, in World War II. And when those boys came back from Germany, they were pretty bitter. Because I had a brother that came back, he was a flyer. There were lots of them. Thought that they didn't want to go any more than they did. It was against their religion too, but they stood up for their country. And really, we've got an awful lot around here. Look at this Mennonite church. Did you see it as you came into down the east here?
No, I came in from the west.
You want to go out and drive by here? It just last year they dedicated it was estimated $3,500,000 out there. It's $3,500,000 in that church, and there's a lot of people here that are German, and they pretty much try to hold of the family descendants, you know, and their beliefs, and or not necessarily their beliefs, but the same nationality. They want to. We've got another group that's called the Holderman Mennonites. And they wear black hats, little black caps the ladies do, and black hose. Good people. They really sacrifice for their religion.
Have they served in the military?
No, they don't even vote. The Holderman.
Yeah.
The Mennonites do.
How come they're called Holdermans?
You're asking a question. I don't know. Actually, the Mennonites broke off from they are the mother church, shall we say. But they have to send their children to school until they're 16. But they have built a school out of it. It's not very far from town, about 2 miles east and a mile or a couple miles south. And they have built a school. They got a permit from the state, and they have their own teachers, and they have the Bible. They teach their children the way they wanted to believe the Bible and all that. And they just did that about a year and a half ago. And the children have probably gone 1 year to that school.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
First the cars, and then the airplanes. and the different roads and the paved roads and the effort people put out and we had these little schools in our area, and my daddy, he hated to move from Phoenix, Arizona back here. It was a step, you might say, backward in a way. I mean, for we children to go to school and all this kind of things. But then he went to working to get all of those schools in accord, and they moved them to one center, and they bought they bought trucks actually and covered them, and transported the children to these schools and had all the grades in high school. And it was a few years until they built a school large enough to handle all those people.
Mm-hmm.
We had lunchroom and all that. And I've seen so much advancement. It's been wonderful. I'm just going to move it will blow your mind. Travel's been wonderful too. I've got to travel an awful lot my latter years, and so that's been a lot of fun too.
Yeah. Well, sound like you have had a good life.
I always look forward to everything.
Okay. How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I had 2 sisters and 1 brother.
And what were their names?
Violet, Alene, and Edward.
Mm-hmm. And you're the oldest, aren't you?
I'm the oldest.
What were their ages? When were they born?
I have to think about that.
Mm-hmm.
My Violet was born. I was 2 years and 9 months when she was born,
Mm-hmm.
and the next sister was 6.5 years, and the brother was 15.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So we're all my 2 younger ones were quite a bit younger.
How many are left?
2,
2.
myself and my brother,
Mm-hmm.
Edward.
Where does he live?
He lives in
In Enid. And what year were you married?
1923.
1923. And how many kids do you have?
2.
2. What are their names?
Letter J, Edward Jordan,
Mm-hmm.
and Marianne Jordan Adams.
And how many grandkids do you have?
2 grandchildren,
What are their names?
Chris and Andrea,
Mm-hmm. And they live in Cordell?
Cordell, Oklahoma.
Yeah, okay. Anything else you can think of?
I can't think. I don't know. Very much money, maybe. Why, I have no idea. I shouldn't say because I don't know how much they came here with, but I would guess not over a couple $1,000s. And you could buy half of this country when they came here for that much money. And I guess Hefner's done the same way.
Well, Hefner always lives in Oklahoma City.
Yes, but he's in this oil play because even when I was a little girl, they put down some oil wells and they couldn't do it. They couldn't hardly get down 500 feet. They did them about like they would a water well.
Mm-hmm.
But they would come out those great big old steam engines and all the biggest mess you ever saw in your life and didn't get any place with it. But they've tried ever since I was a kid out there in our area, to go down oil wells.
So Hefner has some minerals under your place.
Yeah. Well, he owns some land out. He's owned land out there. He's owned the land.
Yeah.
You see, and I bought it of him. It's been in my pasture ever since he's owned that land out there. Now it's soon after I was married. And he's owned that land, but I paid him. I think it was possible. They tell me that there's a law or something that I would have not had to pay him for the land. After it's been under in your fence, around you've had it fenced, and in your property all these years, they can't take it away from you. But I paid him for it. Not very long ago. Well, it is really creek bottom.
Mm-hmm.
It's got the minerals.
Yeah.
But you know what? He was really fine to deal with.
He was?
Oh, perfect.